What's up everyone, welcome back to ARTV. My name is John and it's time for a review of the Comeback album, their 5th studio album. It's the Jonas Brothers. You know them, you love them, or else you probably hate them because they were everywhere during your teenage years and at this point you just resent them. But this new record is called Happiness Begins. The Jonas Brothers attempted a comeback in 2013. They released the singles First Time and Pom Poms. I didn't hate them, I didn't love them, but they were still pretty solid tracks. They didn't perform as well as the Joe Bros thought they would, and the band quickly dissipated. Nick Jonas kind of pulled out, went in his own direction. I highly recommend watching the Chasing Happiness documentary that came out just before this record. It's something that's not imperative to watch to get this record or something, but still, it's a nice complimentary piece that really lets you know about the inner turmoil and workings of the band, how they blew up, where they went, why they fell apart, and why they're back. Sucker dropped like a bombshell as the lead single from Happiness Begins and saw chart success worldwide. Fans seemed to be loving it, and it grabbed that #1 spot on the US Hot 100 more than a decade after the band's peak time in their popularity. It's kind of crazy that that happened, but I'm really happy for them. It's a perfect pop song. It goes down with a summery flavor to it, and I was curious to see where the album would go from there because they were bringing in some outside co-writers, and we got more of that on the track Cool, which served as the second single. That one I was a bit more cold on, if you will. It's a little bit too cutesy for me, a little bit too tongue-in-cheek, so I was interested but also slightly worried to see how this would play out in album form, so what did we get? If you're an OG Jonas Brothers fan like myself, you'll probably know that the band actually used to write the majority of their material themselves. That's what I always appreciated about them. I think everyone always had this misconception that they were this manufactured boy band that didn't know a thing about music, but that's actually the opposite of the truth. That's another reason why I highly recommend watching that Chasing Happiness documentary. Safe to say I got made fun of a lot for actually liking the Jonas Brothers in middle school and high school, but hey, look at them now. They're back and on top of the world. They've definitely deviated with Happiness Begins because there are a lot of outside producers. It doesn't feel as cohesive with the songwriting. You've got everybody from Ryan Tedder to Joel Little to many other big names, Justin Tranter and more, hopping on these tracks with them, co-writing. And because of that, I feel that there's a bit of an identity crisis here. It doesn't entirely through and through feel like a Jonas Brothers release, and that is disheartening. I think that there's still some really solid tracks here. I think musically, it's kind of a watered down version of them at times. Obviously, the Jonas Brothers have grown a lot in the past decade since we've heard from them in album form. I wasn't expecting the exact same type of music by any means, but here, I just feel that there's a lot of tropes. There's a lot of generic tendencies, from the muted guitar chords to the fact that these progressions and these lyrical themes are something that they've touched on themselves, or else so many other bands and artists have over the past 2 decades. It just feels like some of these topics have already been driven into the ground, and they don't necessarily bring a ton of new material to the table. Guitars are definitely more of an afterthought on this record, I would say. Also, a lot of the drumming feels more sterile and programmed. A lot of these tracks, you're just really waiting for that moment where you want them to break out, and occasionally they do that, but most of the time it just feels like they're holding something back because they're afraid to go there, to cross that line where it's like, okay, are we pushing too much into this genre? Are we trying to bend this way? Instead, let's just keep it on the straight and safe and narrow. Happiness Begins is being billed as this big comeback event, and it is. It deserves that status, but with that comes the price tag of knowing that there's unrealistic expectations that are never going to be fulfilled. And at the end of the day, it does seem like they're having fun with this. That was their intention of coming back. It seems like there is some brotherly love there, but I think other things are lost in translation. It seems as though they kind of got in the heads of the producers a little bit too much, and that reflects all throughout the album. There are definitely tracks where it seems like they're being a little bit cheeky and they're pushing buttons a little bit, and it reminds me of the old Joe Bros that I knew and loved. And I wanted to see that, but also a more mature and nuanced approach, and they do provide that in places. It's just that it's not always something where we can have the cake and eat it too. I guess to briefly summarize some of the positives and negatives here, it does seem like they're having fun. They're being brothers again. The Jonas Brothers are back. That's a positive in and of itself. And there are definitely some great songs on here, even some good ones. Some ones that I'm a little bit torn on, but still overall enjoy more than I don't. I think that the production definitely has some glitches, some issues, some things that could have been fixed. I think that the sound is scattered and the tone isn't always as direct as it probably needed to be. And a lot of the pop songs that they're writing here feel very formulaic, very for the masses, by the numbers, and it seems like there was a lot of math that went into these equations to make sure that a lot of them fit the mold perfectly. And sometimes you need that imperfection. Sometimes you need to break out of that mold, and occasionally it happens here, but the Joe Bros, please, you gotta show your teeth to us just a little bit more. Show us what you've been through. It's frustrating because I know so many people, including myself, really wanted to be excited about this and get into the groove of the album, but unfortunately it doesn't really find its footing, and we're gonna get into that further. Let's get to the track list breakdown. A good place to start when discussing specific tracks with this record, I feel, would be Used to Be, because this is something that I feel very torn on. It's the Jonas Brothers, but it's also very modernized and also homogenized. It seems like they're trying to drift along the wreckage of the rest of pop in 2017. It feels a little bit outdated already. It has this kind of trappy percussion on it, and the aura that screams, I'm trying to be a little bit of acoustic guitar, indie singer-songwriter, but I'm also following these trends here, but I also have a message that definitely connects. And I think that the lyrics on this track and the vocal performances from Nick and Joe are easily the best things about it. Love Her approaches songwriting from a romantic perspective. Obviously, Nick, Kevin, and Joe are all in long-term relationships at this point and seem to be very happy and content in that stage of their life. It's a track that once again gets washed out in some ways. It has a very basic looping acoustic guitar progression to it, and it slowly adds in other rhythms, other instruments, and other things into the mix, but I never really feel that it gets going to the point where this actually becomes a full-fledged effort that truly works and can stand on its own. There's certainly fun to be had with this record if you're looking in the right places. I think Strangers is a perfect representation of where they are in 2019. The themes, the more mature vibe, but also it's the Jonas Brothers, and that much is very clear. There's plenty of synthesizers on this track. In fact, there's some synth pop cuts all throughout this record, and I really like when they can strike that delicate balance between having some light 80s leaning guitars in the mix, but also the bright synths and the fact that they have a connectivity between the band members, and that much is clear, especially the backing vocals on Strangers. That's one of the high points there, and Nick Jonas's falsetto vocals, they definitely send this one over the moon, and I could say similar things about another one of my top favorites, Only Human. Shellback has been responsible alongside Max Martin for producing some of the biggest pop smashes of the 2000s and the 2010s, and here Shellback brings his talents to really help them refine a tasteful but also playful type track that mixes a nice little guitar loop, something that definitely reminds me of DNCE, Joe Jonas's band, and also a little bit of Nick Jonas. And I feel that this album in general, it suffers overall from tapping a little bit too much into the Nick Jonas solo material, which I never thought stood out all that much. DNCE, on the other hand, they had a lot of fun vibes to them. It's something that you could party to, but they also had a few that resonated emotionally. Don't Throw It Away is a pop rock smash, something that has a high replay factor, I can tell already. One of the most memorable tracks on the album, and I could say similar things also for the cut that comes right before that every single time. Despite the fact that it feels slightly underwritten, they still perform on this track. They bring something to us that has a connectivity that I think I'll be coming back to. We unfortunately close out this album on some really generic and tedious notes. Starting right after Strangers, we get the mostly Joe Jonas-led track Hesitate, which again has these muted acoustic guitar chords. I could get into a whole rant on the Ryan Tedder approach that's been taking place since like 2013. I liked him up to this point, and I know he didn't even co-write or co-produce this track, but still, his presence and influence have been felt in pop, and it just really homogenizes things, and I don't get much out of that one at all. And then immediately after that, we're thrown into the back-to-back combo of Rollercoaster and then Comeback, which is supposed to obviously speak to their comeback, their grand return to music. And Rollercoaster in particular, I really take issue with, because not a single Jonas brother has a writing credit on the song, and it just plays out like this boring cross between One Republic, Mumford & Sons, and this desperate indie band that's trying really hard to chart by writing a big pop song. And it's just an amalgamation of literally anything that's been poured into the pop bucket in the past 2 decades, and I can't stand the song. In fact, I would say it's easily one of the Joe Bros' worst. Happiness Begins is definitely a mixed bag all throughout. It's something that doesn't play out that cohesively. They kind of jump around in terms of sound and production choices. I think that there are some definite smashes here, but overall, I'm not as big of a fan as I really wanted to be. This record for me is getting a 3 out of 5. I would really like to know though, what did you guys get out of Happiness Begins? Were there some ones that you really connected with, or did it disappoint you and let you down? Please drop a like on this review and subscribe for the love of music. If you want to check out a Jonas Brothers single review that I did, tap right over here, or tap here for another recent pop review. All of my social media accounts, including my Patreon, can be found in the description down below. Thank you guys so much for watching and for your support, and I'll see you soon for more right here on ARTV.